From the highway, there was nothing unusual about Ashbury. About 40,000 people lived there in a valley surrounded by mountains and black pine forest. An old railway cut through the northern side of town. Downtown sat beside the river. Farther south were warehouses, empty factories, and county roads that eventually disappeared beneath the trees. There was an old hotel, a police station, an abandoned shopping plaza, a radio station that hadn't broadcast legally in 30 years. Ordinary places, at least from the outside. Most people who lived in Ashbury went to work, raised families, complained about traffic, watched the weather, and never experienced anything they couldn't explain. Others weren't so lucky. Over the years, people disappeared from roads that supposedly didn't exist. Emergency calls arrived before the emergencies happened. Photographs showed people decades before they were born. Security cameras recorded tomorrow. And beneath almost every investigation, sooner or later, the same two words appeared. District B? Nobody could agree on what District B actually was. A forgotten police division, a municipal department, an archive designation, maybe nothing at all. Then, 3 days after Warp 100 and 3.7 began broadcasting again, the abandoned Ashbury North Railway tunnel turned itself back on. Dr. Claire Mercer had spent most of her adult life studying things that collapsed. Roads, bridges, abandoned mines, subway tunnels, buildings constructed overground nobody had properly understood. She had grown up in Ashbury, but left at 18 and rarely came back. When the city called and told her seismic monitors had detected a large underground cavity beneath the old railway line, she assumed they had found another maintenance chamber. Then she saw the measurements, 32 meters wide, nearly 70 meters long, and directly beneath a section of tunnel where the original construction plans showed solid rock. Claire looked across the conference table. These scans are wrong. The city engineer shook his head. We ran them 4 times. Then your equipment is wrong. We brought in another system. And? Same result. Claire stared at the map. What's down there? The engineer slid an old photograph toward her. Ashbury North Tunnel, 1954. A group of construction workers stood beside the unfinished track. One man had circled something in the background. A steel door. Claire looked up. That wasn't in the plans? No. Does it still exist? We don't know. A voice came from behind her. It exists. Claire turned. The man standing in the doorway was Thomas Reed. 63, retired railway engineer, gray beard, work boots, the kind of man who still carried a mechanical pencil in his shirt pocket even though he hadn't worked a railway in 15 years. Claire recognized him. Mr. Reed, you used to call me Tom. I was 12. You broke into the signal shed twice. Once, twice. Claire almost smiled. Then Thomas looked down at the photograph. The smile disappeared. You shouldn't open that door. Claire leaned back. That's usually what people say right before I have to open something. Thomas looked at her. This time they're right. They entered Ashbury North just after 8 the following morning. The tunnel had been closed for decades. Rust covered the rails. Water ran slowly down concrete walls. Old electrical cabinets stood open and empty. Claire's flashlight moved over faded signs. North platform. Signal access. Maintenance, Thomas walked several steps behind her. You worked here when this closed? Yes. Why did they shut it down? Officially, I already know the official answer. Structural instability. And unofficially, Thomas didn't answer. They reached the point marked on Claire's scan. Solid concrete wall to the left. Rock to the right. Nothing. Claire checked the tablet. The cavity is directly beneath us. Thomas stared toward a row of rusted electrical boxes, then walked to the third one. He pulled it open. Inside was an old metal lever. Claire looked at him. You've done this before? Thomas gripped the lever. Once, he pulled. Somewhere beneath them, something enormous clicked. Then another. Then another. Lights began switching on farther down the tunnel. One at a time. Yellow lamps disappearing into darkness. Claire whispered, There's no power here. Thomas walked toward the wall. A vertical seam had appeared in the concrete. The steel door from the photograph. Stamped across its surface, Ashbury Municipal Continuity. Claire touched the lettering. What is municipal continuity? Thomas inserted an old key. District B. The lock opened. Claire stared at him. You know what District B is? Thomas pushed the door inward. I know what it was supposed to be. The staircase descended far beneath the railway. At the bottom, lights were already on. The stairs ended at a train platform. Claire stopped on the final step. It was clean. Not abandoned clean. Maintained clean. Cream tiles, wooden benches. A clock ticking above the platform. Rails disappearing into 2 black tunnels. A sign hung across the opposite wall. District B. Claire looked back at Thomas. This is underneath Ashbury. Part of it? There are no tracks connecting to this. Not anymore. You knew this was here? Thomas nodded. What was it? He looked along the empty platform. The reason Ashbury still exists. Beyond the platform was a control room. Claire expected something sophisticated. It wasn't. Most of the equipment looked 60 or 70 years old. Telephone relays, railway signal boards, mechanical switches, paper logs, rows of analog meters. Equipment from different decades had been grafted together as technology changed. At the center of the room was an enormous map of Ashbury. Claire stepped closer. Colored lines ran underneath streets and buildings. Telephone cables. Railways. Electrical conduits. Maintenance tunnels, emergency communication routes. Some she recognized. Others shouldn't have existed. Small metal labels identified locations. Bellwether Hotel. Ashbury Police. County Road 6. Black Pine. Hawthorne Plaza. Orb. Property storage. Claire turned. Why are all of these connected? Thomas shook his head. They weren't. What? We didn't connect them. Claire looked back at the map. Thomas moved beside her. It started with the railway. He pointed toward Ashbury North. In 1954, construction crews were cutting the tunnel through the northern ridge. They broke into a cavity. A cave? That's what they thought. What was inside? Nothing. Claire waited. Thomas continued. That's what frightened them. She frowned. A hole in the ground frightened railway workers. It was 30 feet across when you stood inside it. So, from outside, the cavity measured less than 4 feet. Claire stared at him. That's impossible. That's why they sealed it. Thomas walked toward an old photograph pinned beside the map. Workers stood around a rough opening in the tunnel wall. Beyond it, darkness. The first problem started 3 days later. Telephone operators heard calls crossing lines that weren't physically connected. Railway signals changed for trains that didn't exist. Maintenance workers opened doors and came out somewhere else. One man entered a service corridor beneath the station. Thomas paused. He came out of the Bellwether Hotel. Claire looked toward the map. Across town? Thomas nodded. 6 miles away. What did the city do? What cities always do? He gave a tired smile. They formed a committee. Claire almost laughed. Thomas didn't. Then people started disappearing. He pointed toward the words municipal continuity. District B was created to stop that. How? At first, they tried isolating the systems. It didn't work. No. Then what? Thomas looked at the routing board. They learned to redirect them. Claire's expression changed. Redirect what? We never knew. Signals? Sometimes. People? Sometimes. Objects. Thomas didn't answer. He didn't need to. Claire thought about the cases she had heard growing up. The phone booth? The hotel? The missing hikers? The suitcase. She looked at Thomas. You're saying all of that. I'm saying Ashbury has spent 70 years living above something nobody understands. Claire moved along the control board. A route marked County Road 6 connected to an old telephone exchange. Emergency calls? Thomas nodded. Another route connected Warb to the same network. The radio station? Yes. Hawthorne Plaza connected through an old security trunk. Tomorrow's camera footage? Thomas nodded again. Claire stepped back. They weren't separate incidents. No, they were leaks. Thomas looked toward the dark tunnel beyond the platform. That's what we called them. Claire stared at the map. And District B routed around them? For a while. What happened to the missing people? Thomas went silent. Thomas. Some came back. Some? Not where they started. And the others? His eyes remained on the map. Sometimes they called. Claire thought of Warb broadcasting voices of people who had vanished years earlier. Her skin prickled. So they're alive. Thomas finally looked at her. I didn't say that. Claire noticed another map beneath the main one. Only a corner showed. She pulled it free. Thomas immediately stepped forward. Claire? Too late. This map was older. 1954. Ashbury appeared as little more than streets around the railway. but a black mark sat beneath the northern tunnel. At Site 01. Claire looked at Thomas. Site 1. He said nothing. She followed a thin line running beyond the edge of the county. Another mark. Far away. Site 02. Then another. Site 03. Claire looked at him. Ashbury isn't the only one. Thomas shook his head slowly. No. What are these? We never found out? You had 70 years? We had 70 years to keep Ashbury from becoming one of the places people simply stopped coming back from. Claire looked around the room. For the first time, she understood the equipment. This wasn't a laboratory. It wasn't designed to study something. It was built like a railway switch yard, a system for deciding where things went. Then one indicator illuminated. Warb. Thomas turned immediately. Another. County Road 6, then Hawthorne, Black Pine. One after another. Each light glowed red, then changed. CLOs. Claire stepped toward the board. What's happening? Thomas moved quickly between switches. I don't know. That's reassuring. This system hasn't operated since the tunnel closed. The final indicator illuminated. District B beneath it. Final transfer. The platform lights outside turned on. A bell rang once. Claire heard something in the tunnel. Metal wheels. Far away. Growing closer. She looked at Thomas. There isn't a railway connected to this platform? He whispered. I know. Headlights appeared in the darkness. The train that entered District B looked decades old. Green passenger cars. Ashbury North lettering faded along the sides. It slowed. Stopped. The doors opened. Nobody stepped out. Claire approached carefully. Inside the first carriage, objects had been arranged on the seats. Telephone headset. Police badge. Old camera drive. Gray coat. A clipboard labeled Arthur Bell. Headphones bearing a faded Warb logo. Claire looked through the next carriage. More objects. Wallets, keys, photographs, luggage tags, things belonging to people Ashbury had lost. Thomas touched one seat. It's returning them. The people? His face fell. No. The platform speaker crackled. Static. Then a man's voice. Tom? Thomas froze. Claire looked at him. The speaker repeated, Tom? Thomas walked slowly toward it. His hands trembled. Daniel? Claire had never seen fear on his face. Now she saw something else. Hope! My brother! He whispered. You worked here. He stayed behind when we sealed District B. The speaker crackled. Thomas moved closer. Where are you? His brother answered. Not somewhere you can follow. Thomas closed his eyes. 40 years of questions disappeared from his face for 1 second. Then Daniel said, You can shut it down now. How? The original switch? Thomas looked toward the control room. Will that bring you back? Long static. Then, no? Thomas swallowed. Are you alive? This time, the silence lasted longer. Daniel answered, I don't know anymore. The speaker went quiet. Thomas opened a locked cabinet inside the control room. One mechanical lever remained. Emergency network closure. Claire looked at the Ashbury map. If we do this, it closes every route. For good. Thomas looked at Site 02 on the old map. Ashbury's routes. Claire understood. Not the network. Only they're part of it? Thomas put his hand on the lever. Claire joined him. Together, they pulled. The control room shook. Every relay activated at once. Then, across Ashbury, things became quiet. On County Road 6, the disconnected phone line went dead. Inside Hawthorne Plaza, camera 14 lost its final signal. At the municipal property warehouse, shelf 43 was suddenly empty. Inside Warb, the red-on AR sign flickered one last time, then went dark. At the Bellwether Hotel, the lock on room 214 turned by itself. The door quietly closed. Deep beneath Ashbury Police Station, an old District B indicator went black. At Black Pine Lookout, a light no electrical system power disappeared from the upper window, and beneath Ashbury North, the great municipal map went dark. Every location, every route, every indicator, gone. Thomas watched the last light disappear. For 70 years, something beneath Ashbury had always been active. Now, nothing. The train remained on the platform, its doors closed. The engine started. Claire expected it to return through the tunnel. Instead, it moved forward and slowly disappeared into darkness, not around a bend, not into fog. One carriage, then another, then nothing. The rails ended 20 yards beyond the platform. Claire stared. Thomas didn't. He had seen enough impossible things for one lifetime. They left District B before sunrise. The steel door was sealed. Then concrete was poured across it. Ashbury North Tunnel was filled 6 months later. The municipal maps were classified and removed. Officially, District B had never existed. And then something unexpected happened. Nothing. Weeks passed. Then months. No impossible emergency calls. No future security footage. No changing photographs. No broadcasts from dead stations. No unexplained transfers. For the first time since anyone could remember, Ashbury became quiet. Thomas finally retired. Claire returned to her work outside the valley. Families continued living in the town. Children walked to school. People stopped for coffee downtown. Traffic backed up beside the river every weekday at 5. The bellwether remained old. Warb remained abandoned. Black Pine remained a forest. Maybe that was all the people who built District B had ever wanted. Not answers. Not control. Just the chance for 40,000 people to live somewhere ordinary. 2 years later, workers clearing an old municipal records building discovered a steel filing cabinet sealed behind a brick wall. Inside was one District B box. Most of it was empty. One map remained. It did not show Ashbury. Different terrain, a coastline, a long peninsula. Several small towns, no names. At the center was one black mark. Site-02. Status? Active. Beneath it was the original 1954 survey sheet. 2 entries had been typed near the bottom. Site-01, Ashbury, CO-losed. Site-02, active. Someone had added one handwritten sentence beneath them. Closing one route does not close the network. Ashbury never appeared in another District B report. The abandoned radio station remained silent. The phone on County Road 6 never rang again. And whatever waited beyond Black Pine seemed to disappear with the last train. People eventually stopped talking about District B. Then they stopped remembering it. Today, if you drive through Ashbury, you probably won't notice anything unusual. You'll see an old railway, a hotel, a police station, an abandoned radio building, roads disappearing into Black Pine Forest. Ordinary places, and perhaps that's what Ashbury always wanted to be. Ordinary. There is only one problem. District B's final map didn't contain one site. It contained 2, and somewhere far from Ashbury, Site-02 is still active. If this was your first visit to Ashbury, the story doesn't begin here. Start the Ashbury Mysteries from the beginning. There are roads, photographs, broadcasts, hotel rooms, phone calls, and missing people scattered throughout these cases. And now that you know what District B was trying to do, you may notice things the first time through that didn't seem important before.